Have you ever wondered what unites and sometimes divides the billions of people on our planet? For millennia, religion has been a fundamental part of human civilization, acting as the ultimate guiding force that shapes our moral frameworks, our laws, our art, and even our personal identities. Today, we are taking an epic journey across human history to explore the 7 major world religions: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Shinto, Sikhism, and Judaism. Together, these traditions are followed by the vast majority of the global population. But in this video, we aren't just going to look at what these different traditions believe. We are going to uncover why they evolved the way they did. We'll explore the fascinating geographic theory that explains why harsh desert landscapes birthed faiths focused on a single, mobile god, while fertile river valleys inspired traditions with thousands of deities. We'll trace how ancient trade routes like the Silk Road carried these profound ideas across oceans and mountains. And we'll decode how you can actually read a culture's core beliefs just by looking at the architecture of their sacred buildings. Whether you are deeply devout, a history buff, or just fascinated by human culture, this deep dive will give you a completely new perspective on the global tapestry of faith. Today, we're diving into the global tapestry of faith, an exhaustive analysis of the 7 major world religions. Introduction. The systematic study of global religious traditions requires a comprehensive understanding of the historical, sociological, theological, and geographic frameworks that have organized human societies since antiquity. The world religions paradigm, pioneered in the United Kingdom during the 1960s by scholars such as Ninian Smart, was developed to demarcate belief systems deemed to have been especially large, internationally widespread, and profoundly influential in the development of human civilizations. This paradigm was initially intended to broaden the academic study of religion beyond its traditional, myopic focus on Western Christianity, allowing for the inclusion of massive Eastern and indigenous traditions into undergraduate pedagogy and global censuses. While the paradigm has proven highly useful for sociological classification, it has faced substantial critique in contemporary academia. Scholars of religion, notably Jonathan Z. Smith, have argued that the paradigm is intrinsically flawed because it utilizes the Protestant branch of Nicene Christianity as the definitive model for what constitutes a religion. Critics contend that this framework is encumbered by discourses on modernity and power relations, often encouraging an uncritical understanding of faith by artificially dividing deeply fluid and syncretic cultural practices into mutually exclusive categories. Furthermore, it places arbitrary judgments on which belief systems are considered major, often marginalizing folk religions, indigenous practices, and new religious movements, NRMs. Despite these academic critiques, the categorization of the world's principal spiritual traditions remains a vital heuristic tool for analyzing demographic trends, legal frameworks, and cultural evolution. The global religious landscape is currently dominated by 7 major traditions, which can be broadly classified into Abrahamic, Dharmic, and East Asian indigenous groups. Rank. Religious tradition. Estimated global adherence. Historical origin period. Primary geographic hearth. 1. Christianity. 2.20 to 2.38 billion. c. 30 CE. Judea, Middle East. 2. Islam. 1.80 to 1.90 billion. c. 610 CE. Hijaz, Middle East. 3. Hinduism. 1.10 to 1.16 billion. c. 20th to 17th century BCE. Indian subcontinent. 4. Buddhism. 490 to 506 million. c. 5th century BCE. Indian subcontinent. 5. Shinto. 104 million. Pre-6th century CE. Japanese archipelago. 6. Sikhism. 25 to 30 million. 15th century CE. Punjab, Indian subcontinent. 7. Judaism. 14 to 17 million. c. 13th century BCE. Levant, Middle East. Data synthesized from diverse demographic estimates and sociological classifications detailing historical significance and follower counts. These 7 traditions diverge immensely in their theological premises, ritualistic expressions, and societal impacts. To understand their fundamental differences and surprising historical intersections, one must trace their evolutionary biology, their geographic origins, their core dogmatic architectures, and the sociological dynamics that govern their modern manifestations. The evolutionary, cognitive, and geographic origins of religious belief. The genesis of organized religion is not merely a historical phenomenon, but an evolutionary one, intrinsically tied to the cognitive development, geographic distribution, and socioeconomic maturation of early human societies. Cognitive evolution and prehistoric evidence. Evolutionary anthropologists assert that the biological prerequisites for religious belief emerged alongside the dramatic expansion of the hominid brain, specifically the neocortex, which tripled in size over the course of human evolution. Robin Dunbar theorizes that the neocortex only became large enough to process complex, multi-layered social phenomena, such as the conceptualization of deities and communal belief systems approximately 500,000 years ago. Furthermore, Lewis Walpert argues that the advent of complex tool use required early humans to hold a mental image of a non-existent object and possess a fundamental understanding of causality, cause and effect. This cognitive leap was instrumental in the evolution of belief, as it allowed humans to conceptualize unseen forces causing observable natural phenomena. The prehistoric archaeological record provides profound evidence of these early religious intuitions. At Atapuerca in Spain, the bones of 30 Homo heidelbergensis individuals were discovered in a pit, representing some of the earliest evidence of the ritual treatment of the dead. In the Khabra cave in Israel and the Shanidar site in Iraq, Neanderthals intentionally buried their dead in shallow graves alongside animal bones and stone tools, suggesting a primitive belief in an afterlife or emotional spiritual connection. The most definitive early evidence of symbolic religious thought is found at Kafsa in Israel, dating back 100,000 years, where anatomically modern human skeletons were stained with red ochre and buried with grave goods, including a wild boar mandible placed deliberately in the arms of a deceased individual. Similarly, in South Africa, the use of ochre for abstract rock art dating back 80,000 years predates the earliest extant shamanic cave paintings, indicating the deep antiquity of human spiritual imagination. The Neolithic Revolution and the invention of writing. While small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers possessed localized, animistic beliefs managed by shamans, the transition to codified, organized world religions was catalyzed by the Neolithic Revolution roughly 11,000 years ago in the Near East. The shift from a mobile foraging lifestyle to sedentary agriculture led to a massive population explosion. Human societies rapidly transitioned through scales of complexity, from bands, tens to hundreds of individuals, to tribes, to chiefdoms, to massive states, tens to hundreds of thousands of individuals, and eventually to empires. In small bands, social cohesion is maintained through genetic relatedness and direct interpersonal familiarity. However, states and empires are composed of thousands of unrelated strangers. Evolutionary psychologists argue that organized religion evolved as a vital social mechanism to bind these unrelated individuals together, reducing intragroup enmity and facilitating large-scale cooperation. The development of moralizing gods who observed and punished human behavior helped maintain peace and reduce murder rates, which anthropologist Jared Diamond identifies as the leading cause of death in early hunter-gatherer societies. As these societies grew, religion was co-opted to serve specific political functions. In early states like ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, theocracies emerged where political leaders functioned simultaneously as spiritual leaders, utilizing divine right to justify central authority, maintain social stratification, and collect taxes in exchange for providing security. A critical technological threshold in the diversification and codification of these religions was the invention of writing approximately 5,000 years ago in Sumeria and ancient Egypt. Prior to literacy, religious ideas were constrained by the collective oral memories of a society. Writing allowed complex, difficult-to-remember sacred truths to be stored permanently in texts, facilitating the establishment of coherent doctrinal systems that remained independent of specific times and locations. A specialized clergy emerged to process and interpret this vast amount of stored information. Writing also introduced a degree of objectivity to religious knowledge. By formulating thoughts into written words, ideas could be mutually exchanged, debated, and validated, a process Karl Popper referred to as the journey toward verisimilitude. Geographic determinism, desert monotheism versus river-valley polytheism. The physical environment profoundly shaped the theological architectures of these emerging religions. A prominent geographic and ecological theory posits a direct correlation between the physical landscape and the evolutionary divergence of monotheistic versus polytheistic belief systems. In settled, fertile river valleys such as those in Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and the Indus Valley, agricultural stability supported the continuous existence of permanent urban centers. In these civilizations, deities were frequently tied to specific geographic locations, natural forces, and agricultural cycles. This environmental reality gave rise to polytheism, where multiple gods governed distinct realms of the natural and human experience, and supernatural forces were divided among a pantheon. Furthermore, because these populations were sedentary, they developed elaborate temple-building cultures. The gods required permanent earthly residences situated at the center of the urban landscape to receive sacrifices and facilitate civic worship. Conversely, agriculturally marginal landscapes, such as the deserts of the ancient Near East, could not support large, permanent agricultural settlements. These harsh environments necessitated mobile, pastoral lifestyles centered around the management of herd animals. The geographic theory argues that mobile societies required mobile, universally accessible deities rather than localized gods tethered to a specific city or river. Consequently, monotheism, the belief in a single, omnipresent creator not bound by geography, evolved as a pragmatic response to a nomadic existence. These early monotheistic traditions initially lacked a native temple-building culture. The Greek historian Herodotus noted that the ancient Persians, observing an early form of Zoroastrian monotheism, built no temples and worshipped outdoors under the lofty, boundless sky, viewing the confinement of the divine within walls as absurd. This theory suggests that three features are intrinsically interlinked in early human history: a lack of temple-building culture, a society constructed around mobility, and a monotheistic worldview. This geographic divergence laid the foundational theological differences between the Abrahamic monotheisms of the Middle East and the diverse polytheistic traditions of Asia. The Abrahamic traditions, linear time, divine law, and the one God. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam comprise the major Abrahamic traditions, so named for their shared reverence for the ancient patriarch Abraham. Geographically originating in the Middle East, these religions are characterized by strict monotheism and a linear conception of time. In the Abrahamic paradigm, time is not a repeating cycle but a singular, purposeful trajectory with a definitive beginning, divine creation, a middle, historical revelation and prophetic intervention, and an absolute end, eschatological judgment, and the establishment of an eternal afterlife. Judaism, the covenant, the law, and the preservation of identity. Judaism is an ancient, monotheistic, ethnic religion spanning over 3 millennia, fundamentally defined by the covenant established between God, referred to reverently as Adonai, and the Jewish people. Central to its theology is the belief in a single, eternal, and incorporeal God who demands justice, compassion, and moral rectitude. The foundational narrative of Judaism is the Exodus, wherein the prophet Moses led the Hebrews out of Egyptian bondage in the 13th century BCE, subsequently receiving the divine commandments and teachings at Mount Sinai. This narrative of liberation and covenantal obligation forms the bedrock of Jewish identity. Unlike many other world religions that heavily emphasize personal salvation in the afterlife, Judaism places a profound emphasis on moral behavior and righteous action in the current, physical world. Core philosophical tenets include tikkun olam, the continuous pursuit of repairing and healing the world, and tzedakah, righteousness, justice, and obligatory charity. Judaism is fundamentally non-creedal, meaning that correct practice, orthopraxy, is often weighted more heavily than specific dogmatic belief, orthodoxy. However, in the 12th century, the philosopher Maimonides formulated 13 principles of faith that became widely accepted, including the belief in one eternal God without a physical body, the supremacy of Moses among prophets, the unalterable nature of the Torah, divine reward and punishment, and the eventual coming of the Messiah and the resurrection of the dead. The religion is deeply textual. The primary sacred text is the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, which is composed of the Torah, teachings/5 books of Moses, the Nevi'im, prophets, and the Ketuvim, writings. Alongside the written texts exists the oral Torah, which includes the Mishnah, the Tosefta, and the Talmud, a massive compilation of rabbinic commentaries and legal debates redacted over centuries in Jerusalem and Babylon. Jewish daily life is governed by halakha, the collective body of Jewish religious law, based on 613 biblical commandments, though only 369 remain applicable following the destruction of the Second Temple. Halakha dictates not only liturgical rituals, but also dietary restrictions, kashrut, ethical obligations, and civil relations. Because Jews were historically scattered widely across the Mediterranean, Europe, and North Africa in a diaspora, they lacked centralized political authority. Instead, community-based rabbis served as leaders, using halakha to maintain social cohesion and preserve ethnic identity in the face of frequent persecution by Christian and Muslim rulers. Modern Judaism is diverse, encompassing Orthodox movements, including Haredi and Modern Orthodox, that view halakha as unalterable divine law, and conservative and reform movements that advocate for more progressive, historically contextualized interpretations of tradition. Christianity, incarnation, universal salvation, and global diffusion. Originating in the 1st century CE as a reformist sect of Second Temple Judaism in the Roman province of Judea, Christianity rapidly evolved into an independent, universalizing religion. It currently stands as the world's largest religion, with approximately 2.38 billion adherents. The faith centers on the life, teachings, crucifixion, and physical resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, whom Christians believe to be the promised Messiah, Christ, and the incarnate Son of God who died to atone for humanity's sins. Christianity introduces the complex theological concept of the Holy Trinity, the belief that the one God exists simultaneously and coeternally as 3 distinct persons: the Father, the Son, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. While this concept has sparked historical and external debates regarding its adherence to strict monotheism, it remains the orthodox bedrock of the faith. The Christian scripture consists of the Old Testament, sharing a lineage with the Hebrew Bible, and the New Testament, which details the Gospels of Jesus' life, the apostolic epistles, and apocalyptic visions. A defining sociological characteristic of Christianity is its status as a universalizing religion. Unlike ethnic religions, such as Judaism or Hinduism, which are closely tied to specific cultural or geographic groups, and generally do not seek converts, universalizing religions actively aim to appeal to all people globally, regardless of ethnicity or location. Early Christianity was highly accessible to diverse populations, gaining converts rapidly in urban centers. Historically, the religion spread through the infrastructure of the Roman Empire via relocation diffusion, missionaries traveling along Roman roads and sea routes, and hierarchical diffusion, such as Emperor Constantine's conversion and subsequent endorsement of the faith. Over centuries, Christianity transitioned from a persecuted, marginalized cult into a dominant ecclesia, a state-sponsored or mainstream religious institution. The institutional framework of the religion, particularly in its Roman Catholic and Orthodox branches, was heavily influenced by canon law. Canon law governed ecclesiastical organization, moral theology, and sacramental administration. Notably, the inquisitorial processes developed within canon law, such as requiring an oath of innocence, profoundly influenced the development of modern Western secular legal systems. Islam, submission, prophethood, and the 5 pillars. Islam, founded in the early 7th century CE, c. 610 CE, in the Hijaz region of the Arabian Peninsula by the Prophet Muhammad, is the youngest and fastest-growing of the major world religions. Followers of Islam, known as Muslims, believe the religion to be the final, universal, and uncorrupted revelation of the primordial monotheistic faith previously preached by ancient prophets such as Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, and Jesus. The absolute oneness, uniqueness, and incomparable nature of God, Tawhid, is the central theological pillar of Islam. The Quran, believed by Muslims to be the verbatim, unaltered word of God revealed to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel over a period of 22 years, serves as the ultimate scriptural and moral authority. The Islamic creed, known as Aqidah, requires belief in 6 core articles: God, the angels, beings of light such as Gabriel and Michael, the divine scriptures, including the original Torah and Gospel, though Muslims believe these were historically distorted, the prophets, with Muhammad serving as the final seal of the prophets, the day of resurrection and judgment, Akhirah, and divine predestination, Al-Qadar. Islam is fundamentally a religion of rigorous practice and submission to the divine will, structured around 5 obligatory acts of worship known as the pillars of Islam, Arkan al-Islam. These include the Shahada, the declaration of faith stating there is no deity except God and Muhammad is his messenger; Salah, 5 daily prayers performed facing the Kaaba in Mecca; Zakat, obligatory almsgiving and charity; Psalm, fasting during the holy month of Ramadan; and Hajj, a physical pilgrimage to Mecca required at least once in a lifetime for those physically and financially able. Islam provides a comprehensive system that encompasses spiritual, legal, and social dimensions. Sharia represents the moral and legal code derived directly from the Quran and the Sunnah, the normative, recorded practices and sayings of Muhammad, known as Hadith. It governs everything from daily hygiene, diet, and marriage to economics, warfare, and criminal jurisprudence. Historically, Islam spread with unprecedented rapidity. Driven out of Mecca due to persecution by local elites whose economic interests in pagan idol worship were threatened by monotheism, Muhammad and his followers immigrated to Medina in 622 CE, the Hijra. There, he established the first Islamic state, implementing the constitution of Medina, which provided collective defense and religious freedom among tribes. Following Muhammad's death in 632 CE, Islam spread beyond the Arabian Peninsula through both military expansion and robust mercantile networks. Muslim merchants, possessing excellent sailing skills and commercial acumen encouraged by Islamic law, dominated the maritime and overland Silk Roads. They brought Islamic theology, scientific inquiry, and architectural aesthetics to Central Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and Southeast Asia. For instance, Muslim traders arriving in Sumatra and Indonesia blended with local populations, leading to the conversion of local kings and the permanent establishment of Islam in regions thousands of miles from its hearth. Today, the global Muslim community is highly diverse, primarily divided into Sunni, 87 to 90%, and Shia, 10 to 13%, branches due to early historical disputes over leadership succession following the Prophet's death. The Dharmic traditions, cyclical time, karma, and cosmic liberation. Originating on the Indian subcontinent, the Dharmic religions Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism share profound philosophical frameworks that contrast sharply with the Abrahamic worldview. A defining characteristic of Dharmic thought is the conception of cyclical time, Kalachakra, where the universe undergoes infinite, eternal cycles of creation, sustenance, and dissolution without a definitive beginning or end. Human existence is similarly viewed through the lens of samsara, the endless, repetitive cycle of birth, death, and reincarnation. Hinduism, Dharma, the caste system, and divine diversity. Hinduism is the world's oldest extant major religion, tracing its origins to the Indus River Valley civilizations approximately 4,500 years ago, contemporaneous with ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian cultures. The term Hinduism is a relatively modern geographical exonym derived from the Greek and Persian names for the people living beyond the Sindhu, Indus, River. It was adopted in the 19th century to describe a vast, cumulative tradition of indigenous texts, rituals, and philosophical schools. Rather than a single organized religion with a specific founder or rigid dogmatic boundaries, Hinduism is a complex synthesis resulting from the historical blending of pre-Aryan indigenous cults and the religious traditions of Aryan migrants who arrived in the subcontinent around 1500 BCE. Hinduism is characterized by immense theological diversity, encompassing polytheism, pantheism, monotheism, and even atheistic philosophical schools. However, most adherents recognize a single supreme, universal reality or world soul known as Brahman, which manifests in various principal deities such as Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer/transformer, and Shakti, the divine feminine energy. The core spiritual pursuit of Hinduism is moksha, the ultimate liberation of the individual soul, Atman, from the painful cycle of samsara. This liberation is achieved by adhering to dharma, cosmic law, righteous duty, and moral order, and navigating karma, the spiritual law of cause and effect, where the intent and execution of actions bear ramifications in current and future lives. The concept of dharma serves as the pivot of the entire Hindu system. It is neither purely religion nor purely law, but a synthesis of both. It intertwines legal structures, religious rituals, and social duties so deeply that they are indistinguishable. Historically, Hindu society was profoundly shaped and stratified by the caste system, Varna, which categorized individuals into hierarchical classes from birth: Brahmins, priests, teachers, and spiritual leaders; Kshatriyas, warriors and aristocratic rulers; Vaishyas, merchants, farmers, and producers; Shudras, laborers and serfs; and Dalits, outcasts or untouchables, relegated to impure labor. Codified in ancient legal texts like the Manusmriti, circa 1000 BCE, the caste system dictated occupation, marriage, and social interaction, maintaining rigid segregation. While modern secularization, urbanization, and the Indian constitution have significantly eroded the legal rigidity of this system, its historical impact on social cohesion and division remains a defining feature of the subcontinent's cultural landscape. The sacred literature of Hinduism is vast, with the Vedas, composed around 1500 BCE in Sanskrit, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and massive epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana molding the consciousness and moral frameworks of the Indian people. Buddhism, the middle way, anatta, and the cessation of suffering. Buddhism emerged in the eastern Gangetic plain of the Indian subcontinent in the 6th or 5th century BCE. It began as a shramana, wandering ascetic, movement, reacting against the rigid rituals, animal sacrifices, and entrenched caste structures of Vedic Hinduism. The religion was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, the Awakened One. Born into a noble family in Lumbini, present-day Nepal, Gautama was profoundly moved by the inescapable suffering, dukkha, of human life, specifically illness, aging, and death. Abandoning his royal heritage, he sought liberation through extreme asceticism and fasting. Finding these severe methods insufficient, he turned to deep meditation, dhyana, and attained supreme awakening, bodhi, under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya. Buddhism fundamentally diverges from Hinduism by rejecting the concept of a creator deity and denying the existence of a permanent, unchanging soul, a doctrine known as anatta, non-self. Instead, it teaches pratityasamutpada, dependent arising, the theory that all mental and physical states arise conditionally from other pre-existing conditions without an underlying universal self. The philosophical and psychological architecture of Buddhism rests on the Four Noble Truths, which diagnose the human condition and prescribe a cure. Dukkha, the innate reality of suffering and the unsatisfactory, impermanent nature of all existing things. Samudaya, the origin of suffering is rooted in craving, desire, and attachment. Nirodha, the cessation of suffering is achievable by relinquishing and extinguishing this craving. Marga, the method to achieve this cessation is the Noble Eightfold Path, a system of ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The ultimate goal of Buddhist practice is nirvana, the blowing out of the passions and absolute liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha advocated for the middle way, a path of moderation between the extremes of severe asceticism and sensory indulgence. Buddhists take refuge in the triple gem: the Buddha, the teacher, the Dharma, the teachings and universal law, and the Sangha, the monastic community. Buddhism is a universalizing religion that spread extensively across Asia. The overland Silk Road was instrumental in its transmission. Buddhist scholars and pilgrim monks, such as the famous Xuanzang in the 7th century CE, traveled through the harsh deserts of Central Asia, translating scriptures in hubs like Dunhuang, and introducing the faith to China, Korea, and Japan. This diffusion resulted in distinct major branches: Theravada, the school of the elders, prominent in Southeast Asia, emphasizing individual nirvana and monasticism; Mahayana, the great vehicle, prominent in East Asia, emphasizing the bodhisattva ideal of deferring one's own enlightenment to assist all sentient beings; and Vajrayana, an esoteric, tantric tradition prominent in Tibet. Sikhism, devotion, absolute equality, and social justice. Sikhism, Sikhi, is a relatively young major religion, originating in the Punjab region of the Indian subcontinent during the late 15th century CE. Founded by Guru Nanak and subsequently developed by 9 successive human gurus, Sikhism arose in a highly pluralistic historical environment characterized by the intersection and frequent tension between entrenched Hinduism and ruling Islam. While a distinct and independent revelation, Sikhism was culturally informed by the surrounding milieu of the Hindu Bhakti and Islamic Sufi movements. These medieval movements emphasized intense, direct personal devotion, mystical love, and the equality of all believers before God, actively rejecting superficial orthodoxy, idol worship, and hierarchical discrimination. Sikh theology is strictly monotheistic and panentheistic, centering on Ikankar, the one supreme creator reality. The core scriptures are contained within the Guru Granth Sahib, a voluminous text comprising hymns and spiritual poetry. Before his death, the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, brought the line of human gurus to a close and designated the Guru Granth Sahib as his eternal, living successor, serving as the ultimate spiritual authority for all Sikhs. A defining hallmark of Sikhism is its vehement rejection of the caste system, ritualistic asceticism, and gender bias, preaching the absolute divine unity and equality of all humankind. The religion does not have a specific, formalized conversion process, emphasizing instead an inward spiritual orientation, honest livelihood, and ethical living. Sikhism asserts that no particular religious tradition holds a monopoly on absolute truth, fostering a highly pluralistic worldview. Central to Sikh practice is seva, selfless service to others, and striving for sarbat da bala, justice, benefit, and prosperity for all of humanity. In 1699, Guru Gobind Singh established the Khalsa, a community of initiated Sikhs who commit to maintaining 5 articles of faith, the 5 Ks. The most visible of these is Kesh, uncut hair covered by a turban, which symbolizes spiritual strength, equality, and military readiness, creating a unified identity that visually dissolved historical markers of caste and social class. The East Asian traditions, Animism, purity, and Syncretism. The religious landscape of East Asia, particularly in Japan and China, is characterized by ancient, highly syncretic traditions that seamlessly blend animism, philosophical ethics, and polytheism. While belief systems like Taoism and Confucianism deeply influence Chinese cultural DNA, Shinto stands out as the primary indigenous religion of Japan, providing a fascinating case study of how ancient animistic beliefs can not only survive, but thrive and inform a highly modernized, technologically advanced society. Shinto, kami, purity, and Japanese aesthetics. Shinto, translating to the way of the gods, or the way of the spirits, is an ancient, ethnic religion indigenous to the Japanese archipelago. Unlike the Abrahamic or Dharmic faiths, Shinto possesses no single historical founder, no central codified scripture, and no rigid dogmatic theology. It is fundamentally an animistic faith based on the veneration of kami superior powers, spiritual forces, or deities that permeate the natural world. Kami are not omnipotent creators. Rather, they inhabit striking natural elements such as mountains, rivers, ancient trees, uniquely shaped rocks, and animals. Furthermore, extraordinary human beings, such as great warriors, poets, and emperors, can be recognized as kami post-mortem. The early mythology of Shinto, codified in texts like the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, posits that the Japanese imperial family descends directly from Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess. Unlike the Abrahamic traditions which operate on a strict moral dichotomy of absolute good and evil, sin, Shinto lacks a concept of original sin. Instead, the focal point of Shinto morality is the distinction between purity and impurity, pollution. Rituals performed at Shinto shrines, jinja, are primarily designed to cleanse spiritual and physical impurities, thereby restoring the innate harmony between humanity, nature, and the kami. Historically, Shinto did not exist in isolation. Following the introduction of Buddhism from the Asian mainland via the Korean peninsula in the 6th century CE, a profound religious syncretism known as Shinbutsu Shugo developed. For over a millennium, Shinto and Buddhism functioned as a unified, interwoven belief system. Upon introduction, the new Buddhist pantheon fit effortlessly into the existing Shinto worldview. Shinto kami and Buddhist bodhisattvas were worshipped together, often housed within the same temple complexes. A symbiotic division of labor emerged. Shinto rituals managed the affairs of this life, such as agriculture, fertility, and marriage, while Buddhism, with its developed doctrines on karma and the afterlife, managed funerals and ancestral rites. Though the Meiji government officially forced the separation of the two religions in the late 19th century to establish state Shinto, the syncretic legacy remains deeply ingrained. Today, modern Japanese citizens frequently engage in both Shinto and Buddhist rituals interchangeably, without perceiving any theological contradiction. Shinto's animistic worldview continues to profoundly influence modern Japanese aesthetics, corporate culture, and technology. The foundational belief that non-human elements, from animals and plants to stones and inanimate objects, possess spiritual energy and life force translates into a deep cultural empathy and respect for craftsmanship. Contemporary sociologists and cultural theorists attribute Japan's unique societal acceptance of robotics and artificial intelligence to this underlying Shinto framework. Rather than viewing synthetic creations as unnatural aberrations or threats to human supremacy, a fear more common in Western, human-centric Abrahamic cultures, the Japanese cultural lens seamlessly integrates AI, robots, and even pop culture avatars, like manga characters or Pokemon, into the natural, spiritual hierarchy, viewing them as entities that can coexist harmoniously with humans. Comparative sociological frameworks, law, time, and sacred space. The sociological categorization of the major world religions reveals profound structural divergences in how these human societies conceptualize existence, legislate morality, and construct physical spaces of worship. Religious legal systems and societal norms. Religion has historically provided the ultimate moral and legal architecture for societal jurisprudence. The major traditions have developed comprehensive legal frameworks that blend ethical injunctions, ritualistic bounds, and civil law. Religious legal system. Associated religion. Primary sources. Scope and historical impact. Halakha. Judaism. Torah, Mishnah, Talmud. Governs daily life, dietary restrictions, kashrut, and civil relations. Crucial for maintaining ethnic and religious identity throughout the historical diaspora. Canon law. Christianity, Catholic/Orthodox. Ecclesiastical councils, papal decrees. Structured internal church operations. Profoundly influenced modern Western secular legal systems, e.g., marriage law, oaths of innocence. Sharia, Islam. Quran, Sunnah, Hadith. A comprehensive divine law governing theology, economics, hygiene, and criminal justice. Serves as the foundational basis for legal systems in many modern Muslim-majority states. Dharma, Hinduism. Vedas, epics, Manusmriti. A fluid concept of cosmic order and righteous duty based on caste and life stage. Deeply intertwines religious ritual with inescapable social obligations. Sacred spaces and architectural symbolism. The theological disparities between Western Abrahamic and Eastern Dharmic/animistic traditions are strikingly materialized in their religious architecture. Sacred spaces are meticulously designed to facilitate specific modes of worship and to physically reflect the culture's cosmological beliefs. In the Abrahamic traditions, worship is primarily a congregational activity requiring communal assembly for prayer, sermons, and liturgical rituals. Consequently, synagogues, churches, and mosques are designed to accommodate large gatherings, placing emphasis on the periphery of the structure and the vast internal void. Architecturally, these structures frequently utilize immense verticality, such as the soaring spires of Gothic Christian cathedrals or the towering minarets of Islamic mosques. This verticality serves as a visual metaphor for humanity's yearning to reach upward toward a transcendent, heavenly creator. Light is also heavily manipulated as a symbol of divine illumination and purity. The stained glass of Christian churches projects ethereal narratives, while the intricate jollies, lattice screens, of Islamic mosques cast poetic geometric shadows, reflecting the unity and infinite nature of God. In contrast, Dharmic architectures, Hinduism and Buddhism, frequently focus on the geometric center rather than the periphery. Temples are often designed as three-dimensional mandalas, representing a physical microcosm of the universe. The architectural design intentionally draws the individual worshipper inward, from the bustling exterior through successive courtyards, toward the garbhagriha, womb chamber, or central stupa. This physical progression symbolizes the inward psychological journey toward enlightenment and the realization of the divine presence residing within the self, contrasting sharply with the Western architectural impulse to reach outward and upward. Furthermore, Eastern religious sculpture utilized complex analogies for physical perfection representing divine anatomy, e.g., a nose like a parrot's beak, diverging from the Greco-Roman reliance on pure geometric forms. Rituals, observances, and sacred time. The rhythms of daily life and the annual calendars of global societies are heavily dictated by religious ritual and sacred time. These observances reinforce communal bonds and provide psychological grounding. Daily prayer and practice. Daily prayer structures vary wildly. In the Abrahamic faiths, fixed prayer times are standard. Devout Jews are required to pray 3 times daily, Shasharit in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, and Ma'ariv in the evening, historically facing the temple in Jerusalem. Muslims rigorously observe Salah, praying 5 times daily at prescribed hours facing the Kaaba in Mecca. Traditional, monastic Christianity developed the canonical hours, a system of praying at 7 fixed times throughout the day, though modern lay Christians often adopt more personalized, spontaneous daily prayer schedules. In Dharmic traditions, daily practice often centers less on petitionary prayer to an external deity and more on inward meditation, the chanting of mantras, and personal devotion. Sikhs, however, engage in specific daily prayers and meditation upon God's name, maintaining a strict balance between work, worship, and charity. Shinto daily practice often involves making simple offerings, such as rice or sake, and clapping hands at a home altar, kamidana, or local shrine to respect the kami. Major religious festivals. Annual festivals serve as cultural anchors, preserving heritage and strengthening social solidarity. Religious tradition. Notable festivals and observances. Significance. Christianity. Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, Lent, Ash Wednesday. Christmas celebrates the incarnation/birth of Jesus. Easter celebrates his resurrection. Lent is a 40-day period of fasting and penance. Islam. Ramadan. Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha, Hajj. Ramadan involves a month of dawn to dusk fasting. Eid al-Fitr breaks this fast. Eid al-Adha commemorates Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son. Hinduism. Diwali, Holi, Rama Navami. Diwali is the festival of lights, symbolizing the victory of good over evil. Holi is the vibrant festival of colors celebrating spring and divine love. Buddhism. Vesak, Buddha Day, Songkran. Vesak is the most significant holiday, commemorating the birth, enlightenment, and death of the Buddha, marked by temple visits and offerings. Judaism. Yom Kippur, Hanukkah, Passover. Yom Kippur is the solemn day of atonement involving strict fasting. Passover celebrates the exodus from Egypt. Hanukkah is the festival of lights. Sikhism. Vaisakhi, Guru Nanak's birthday, martyrdom days. Vaisakhi commemorates the creation of the Khalsa by Guru Gobind Singh, marked by Gurdwara visits and hymn singing. Shinto. Genjutsu, New Year, Matsuri, local shrine festivals. Focused on purification, offering thanks for harvests, and maintaining harmony with nature and local kami. Sociological dynamics. Exclusivism, secularization, and future trajectories. In the contemporary era of unprecedented globalization, the interaction between these major religions is governed by varying theological postures toward non-believers, as well as massive demographic and macroeconomic trends that are reshaping global adherence. theological postures toward the other. Religions navigate the reality of global diversity through three primary theological lenses: exclusivism, inclusivism, and pluralism. Exclusivism, the belief that one specific religious tradition is the sole repository of absolute truth and the only valid path to spiritual salvation. Historically, the Abrahamic faiths have leaned heavily toward exclusivist doctrines. For example, traditional Christian theology often asserts that salvation is achieved exclusively through faith in Jesus Christ, citing scriptures such as John 14 verse 6, rendering other paths invalid. Similarly, Islamic theology views the Quran as the final, uncorrupted revelation that supersedes all prior scriptures. Inclusivism, the belief that while one's own religion contains the ultimate, most complete truth, other traditions may hold partial truths, and their adherents may still be saved through the grace of the primary religion's deity. This is exemplified in Catholic theology by concepts like Karl Rahner's anonymous Christianity, which posits that non-Christians can receive salvation if they earnestly seek God through the dictates of their own conscience, essentially participating in Christian grace without formal knowledge of it. Pluralism, the paradigm that all major religions are equally valid pathways to the divine and to ultimate salvation. Dharmic religions often align closely with pluralistic frameworks. Hindu philosophy, for instance, asserts that various spiritual paths and deities are merely different rivers flowing into the same ultimate ocean of Brahman. Sikhism explicitly rejects the notion that any single religious tradition possesses a monopoly on absolute truth, encouraging interfaith respect and harmony. Secularization versus religious resurgence. Modern sociologists are actively debating the future trajectory of world religions. The traditional secularization hypothesis, prevalent throughout the 20th century, posited that economic development, scientific advancement, and modernization would inevitably lead to the privatization, decline, and eventual obsolescence of religious belief. Recent sociological data strongly corroborates this hypothesis in high-income, industrialized regions. In Europe, North America, Australia, and parts of East Asia, formal religious affiliation is experiencing a steep and rapid decline. In countries such as the United States, Australia, and Uruguay, the percentage of individuals identifying as religiously unaffiliated, often termed nones, comprising atheists, agnostics, and those with no religion in particular, has surged dramatically over the last 2 decades. This decline is often attributed to modern societies no longer requiring rigid religious institutions to enforce the traditional gender and sexual norms that these faiths instilled for centuries. However, the secularization theory fails comprehensively when applied to the demographic realities of the developing world. In emerging economies, particularly across sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and the Middle East, religious adherence is persistently strong and, in many cases, increasing. Rather than disappearing in the face of modernization, religious institutions in these regions are adapting. They operate in highly competitive religious marketplaces, adjusting their doctrines and providing vital social, educational, and medical services in areas where state infrastructure is weak or entirely absent. Furthermore, global demographic birth rates indicate a massive impending shift in the global religious landscape. Islam is projected to be the world's fastest-growing major religious group in the coming decades. Between 2010 and 2015, births to Muslim mothers made up an estimated 31% of all babies born globally, far exceeding the Muslim share of the world's total population. It is projected that less than 20 years from now, the absolute number of babies born to Muslims will exceed births to Christians. Conversely, while the Christian population is growing in younger regions like sub-Saharan Africa, it is aging rapidly in its historical European strongholds. In Europe, the number of deaths among Christians already exceeds the number of births, indicating a significant geographic shift in the center of gravity for the world's largest faith. Conclusion: the 7 major world religions Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Shinto, and Judaism are profoundly more than mere collections of ancient dogmatic texts or antiquated rituals. They are the foundational operating systems of human civilization. Originating from distinct geographic, cognitive, and ecological hearths, These traditions developed diverse frameworks to navigate the complexities of the human condition. The harsh desert landscapes birthed the Abrahamic monotheisms, characterizing reality through linear time, strict divine law, and the pursuit of historical salvation. Concurrently, the fertile river valleys and isolated archipelagos of the East nurtured polytheistic, Dharmic, and animistic traditions that emphasized cyclical rebirth, cosmic duty, and purity in harmony with natural forces. Despite their profound differences in theology, legal structures, and architectural expressions, these religions universally address humanity's ultimate, shared concerns: the mitigation of existential suffering, the establishment of social cohesion among unrelated strangers, and the unyielding search for meaning in a complex universe. In the modern era, while secularization profoundly alters the cultural landscape of the industrialized West, the immense demographic vitality and adaptive socio-political capacity of these traditions in the global South guarantee that the major world religions will remain paramount, irreplaceable forces in shaping human cognition, societal norms, and global geopolitics for centuries to come.